American literature from 1914 to 1945 in the classroom. There is no doubt that English teachers across our US country teach American literature, but there are some very important authors that we need to continue to keep in the classroom just for the sake of the great knowledge they have to share with students. And there are also authors we probably want to explore further with students so they're able to recognize why their text matters and why should we still learn from them today in the 21st century. To better understand the American literature time of this period, we need to understand the United States and its context. It's not what we know of it today. 100 years, it looked very different. Rural towns were more popular to live in. That's where a lot of people did a lot of their um, income, or they made their families, and they wrote their own histories in small towns. There are urban communities um, that are becoming more popular as capitalism rises, as industrialization rises. Most importantly, though, what's occurring during this time period is that we're just nearing the end of World War One and living through the impact of that, and then going to be immersed into World War Two, and also exiting that and how it has impacted the United States a lot, and to the people and the writers that we get to explore. Another thing we need to understand, there's a lot of history occurring during this time period. I mean, the United States is trying to understand how they are going to lead um, the entire world, really, after having great success in these war. And this, especially in World War One, a lot of people have become enlisted, specifically, obviously, men. So we get to kind of understand those perspectives. There's also a lot of perspectives of those who have seen war and have been near it and have been impacted by it. The pandemic is a huge historical occurrence at this time. The influenza flu has impacted and killed many, many people. Just like the one we had not many years ago. It was huge and it was very influential and will be marked down in the history books. There are also social reforms occurring. A big one is the women's suffrage movement. A lot of women, specifically white women, are going through, unfortunately, tough times, as well as other people of color, Black, Indigenous, Latinx, and beyond. But we're able to kind of see that the social reforms occurring and a lot of political landscapes from socialism, democracy, obviously, Marxism even is occurs, so communism and so on. Here's one of the first authors that I think we should continue to explore in the classroom and be excited about. I think, especially in the Midwest, we don't get to hear a lot of the stories of those people and stories that have come about in these plains and Midwestern fields. And so Willa Cather is an astonishing novelist, short story writer, a journalist, and a teacher. Her most important big titles have been Alexander's Bridge, O Pioneers, A Song of the Lark, and most importantly, one of my favorites is My Antonia, where we are able to really dive into these Midwestern settler narratives of first generation and second generation immigrants living in rural community within Nebraska. And I think we explore the relationships between these people who are meeting for the first time and how their relationships grow throughout their lifetime. And so, one of the really important things why we should consider to keep to Cather and create a great emphasis for our students is 100 years ago we are giving the perspective of the European immigrant life and what that looked like, and it looks a lot like the way it is now. Okay, even though the European immigrants are the biggest population coming to the U.S., we're able to see some similarities, and I think that's a really cool thing to be able to learn about. There's a contemporary connection to current immigration. That's what I'm talking about there. She expands on the American dream and these hard workers and these unfortunate events that occur in the early days when technology doesn't exist, things like electricity even, and most importantly, a lot of her imagery writing is incredible. We're really able to sense this prairie landscape, and there's so much beauty that she provides us of the Nebraskan rural lands. Next up is Sherwood Anderson. Sherwood Anderson is a businessman. He was also enlisted, and he also lived abroad. He's a fictional short story writer and most popularly known for being the writer of Winesburg, Ohio. Um, Winesburg, Ohio is a narrative by a local reporter, journalist in this small town in Ohio in the 1890s. And he's providing us these lives of the people and how they are all just one big circle of lies and bigotry and just really exposing each other for things that aren't even factual based on things that people have only heard of. And I think it explores small town politics. And I think that's why it's so incredible to be able to bring this into the students' world. I think he also expands on these Puritan beliefs. He is one of those writers, and what's really important about American modernism right now is that a lot of the contemporary writers in this time want to move away from what we know life to be to what is life now after the World War I has occurred, right? Moving into this new face of America. He's also very anti capitalistic, and he believed that people needed to understand what life is without being so involved and needing to have all of these materials. So he really expands on materialism and how it invokes people to make cruel decisions and how to be awful sometimes to one another just to be able to get something that we think we need, which may not benefit us. Carl Sandburg, really fast here. Chicago is actually one of the biggest titles that I really enjoyed reading from Sandberg, and he's very famously known in Chicago to this day. His politics are rather very leftist and radical and influential within his work. In his work, he explores a lot of these injustices and inequalities occurring for white and African American people. He explores houselessness. He explores all these occurrences of exploitation of people wanting work within urban communities. He also grew up in like a small town area, but his big influence was really talking about the Midwest, specifically Chicago, this urban areas, and he does that within Chicago. And as you can see, here's an image of just the imagery he provides us with. There's this like love and hatred to the world that he's seeing and the world that is allowing for this life's to happen. T.S. Eliot, very popular expatriate American writer. He lived abroad. He was a teacher, a banker, a poet, an essayist, an editor, and a publisher. To me, I think The Wasteland is an incredible read for students to be able to kind of see the multiple voices and characters, being able to understand what the wasteland means to those, why we should refocus on um, bringing back maybe some values that we need to uphold. He's specifically, I believe, talking about, the United States. He's moved away from it because he truly hates it. He's not a fan of what it is becoming, this like powerful nation. Um, and so, anyway, I think it's really great to see that he explores themes in religion. And he's also kind of like this big name because of the new criticism. He decides to explore literature in a way that we only see the style, the words, the context only provided within the paper, and we're able to critique it in that order. That does include any perspective and without us having more knowledge or context behind them. And I think that's what's really interesting about the new criticism. He was one of the tagalongs, but also others came about. Um, Nella Larson is also a great writer and a novelist. Most importantly, Passing is one of those stories that we read in class that I really believe would be impactful to read with students. I think it might also not be the greatest story just because there's a lot of things occurring in the story that are probably not as appropriate. Um, but these are just relationships that we get to see of black mixed individuals who pass as white and are able to live these different perspectives in a in a southern context of the United States. There's a lot of beauty in it, a lot of interesting opinions, and just a lot of unfortunate events that we see occur. Um, Nell Larson is a huge Harlem Renaissance figure, and I don't think we talked about her enough, and I think we should, because she definitely explores racial identity, where a lot of mixed people can really explore and better understand their own lived experiences through this. Zora Neale Hurston is one of my favorite authors, and I think a lot of people already do a phenomenal job in including her within the classroom of the English realm. But if a lot of people don't know this, but she started as an oral historian, she studied anthropology, she worked with an incredible professor, and I think it's so awesome to get excited about Hurston because she decided to go back to her own hometown, Eatonville, Florida, to explore all these voices in a dominant Black community. And I think that's what's really cool. She was really, just from the oral histories, going on the ground, being able to interview to people, talk to people about the folk artwork they do, the folk life culture that they live in. It really provided her context for her own novels to be able to tell these stories of different perspectives. It's a lot similar to Sherwood Anderson's. Winesburg, Ohio, and I think that's a really, really just a really neat way to explore these communities in the United States and what they're going through. So she does explore racism. She's a Black woman, so she does focus on her own experience of being seen by white people and how racist they had been towards her, as well as to community members. And she captured folk traditions. So if you have time, there is this video that I put a minute to give you even more biographical facts about her. But I'm just really, really astonished by her work and her dedication to be able to keep the histories of this dominant Black community. Edna St. Vincent Millay is a white woman and a huge feminist. She was a poet, a playwright. She only wrote like two plays, but still very effective writer. One of her famous poems, or poem that I really enjoyed reading from her was "I Forgot for a Moment," which really explores her diving into this emotional state of a flashback of what land and society was before war ruined it. So she really talks about isolation, the loneliness, this unfortunate experience of seeing your entire world fall apart due to the war. And so it's just a really great perspective to hear about. She explores relationships and again the feminist perspective, all right, which is really important again when we go back to social reforms and talk about what women are thinking at this time, specifically the white women. John Dos Passos is the last author and writer I want to talk about and focus within this American timeline. Um, he was also another member involved in war. He necessarily wasn't enlisted, but he worked as a medical corpsman. At this time that he was also within the realm of war, he was a journalist and wrote a lot of essays, a lot of things that he saw on the ground. He ended up becoming a fictional writer, and I think fiction is a way to really be able to expand on these experiences, these perspectives, these emotions, these philosophies of the world in which the characters live in and consume. He's also incredibly politically involved, so I think a lot of his stories really give us a political landscape um, knowledge of what the world was like, especially in the United States. I think he does a lot of comparison on socialism, communism, and I think one other that I'm blanking on. But I think he's probably someone that I would go back to try to understand what that looked like in the 20th century. Um, he also has a huge critical perspective on inequities. From USA is one of the titles of the short stories we read in class, and I think it really provides us in a context of the harm that the government was already causing, the economy was causing, capitalism. He's a huge. I would see him as a philosopher because he does question life a lot. He's really trying to understand what the purpose of life is, why people are acting the way they do, and why there are systems harming the people and why haven't changes occurred. And so John Dos Passos can really help us understand the influence of politics had on a lot of people. So kind of to end this, I really want to talk about the society literature, and you, by you, I mean students. I think I support English teachers who want to talk about um, American literature, and I want them to include all these incredible authors because they have so much to offer to us. And so, to answer these questions of students who are always saying, "Why do we even learn this? How is this going to help me?" And I think we need to really frame it in a different way of just like, you're just going to learn you're going to quiz yourself on what happens. Like, yes, we learn about literary styles and techniques within all these different stories. There are close readings where we can examine the way that my Antonia uses imagery, right? Or other techniques that T.S. Eliot uses in his New Criticism work. But most importantly, in a broader sense, there's a lot of history in these texts. There's a lot that we can learn from, there's a lot that we can celebrate, and there's a lot that we can question. Why did things go the way they went, and how are they impacting us now? Right? And I think a lot of students forget that a lot of these stories do come from people's perspectives. They are true when they're fictional or not. And I think that's what's really powerful. Secondly, I think society has a huge power on each individual in the way that we do things, in the beliefs that we have, in the work that we choose to do. And when we read literature, we are capable of becoming independent thinkers, independent questioners, independent people who take our own actions because that is how we want it, not because society wants us to, right? There's that picture of a puppet. We are not puppets for any government system, for any societal expectation. We are our own people, and we, thanks to literature, we can understand how to go about that. Thirdly, I think literature, especially in a lot of like Sherwood, Ohio, I mean Sherwood's Ohio, and we see I'm blinking. I'm thinking. Oh yeah, Hurston's Entonville, Florida text really showcased the power of voice. Who is talking? Who's not getting enough voice? And what can we learn from their own ideologies and their own beliefs and systems and the way that they move and navigate the society in which they live in these communities? And so I think literature can really provide context to what we can do and what we can say and how we can make a difference, right? And I think that's why we need to learn literature and we need to read these texts and we read to understand these authors to kind of better understand the path that they have given for us to further expand on. And lastly, community. This world doesn't function if we don't know our community members. It doesn't function well anyway. And so a lot of these stories really provide us context that is so similar to our day to day. I think an author like Dos Passos really captivates the political landscape and the things that are occurring and how people want to break away from it. It's to this day that's still very true. A lot of people are against a lot of what's happening. So how can we speak up about it? Well, we can do it through fictional work. We can impact others to better understand society. There's also, with like the story of passing, trying to understand these racial structures and constructs that people have placed on us. And exploring these literature texts can allow us to answer questions that people or answer questions people currently have now. And so these are just great tools for us to better understand our society and the world we live in and what we as individuals can do to make it a better place or to make change happen. All right. So I will place Better Works cited here, but my citations for this entire slideshow really come from the Norton Anthology American Literature 1914 to 1945. All of the history that I've used comes from there. And the images that you see on the slideshow are from Google Images. So thank you so much. And I hope that it's taught you the reasons why we need to keep these people, amazing people, and continue to learn about them, expand on them with students and others.